Before I come to your calls on that, let's talk to Giles Kenningham tonight, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party and Head of Press for David Cameron when he was Prime Minister. Giles, thank you for coming on tonight. I mean, it feels like Groundhog Day, doesn't it? You've got talk about Westminster being febrile. You've got meetings of the 1922 committee. You've got MPs calling for change on the record or off the record. How on earth have the Tories got themselves here again? Good evening to you.
Good evening to you. Well, look, it's just not plausible, feasible or possible for them to change leaders again. You know, there would be an even greater democratic deficit. There's no mandate for this, and they're going to have to stick with Sunak. Nor do I think actually changing leader would actually help their plight. You know, ultimately, divided parties are unelectable, and at the moment they are an incredibly divided party.
Do you think Rishi Sunak has done a good job as Prime Minister?
Look, he's been given a tough hand to play.
Mm-hmm.
Bear in mind, he's only been Prime Minister probably for about 16, 17 months. I think trust did obviously a lot to damage the brand. And I actually do think if Sunak had taken over before after Johnson without trust, the Tories would probably be in a different situation, in a different political situation. If, you know, up until that point, Keir Starmer really wasn't making any headway in the polls whatsoever. He was struggling. You know, this has really been his, you know, the movement of Labour in the polls can be explained much more by a Tory collapse rather than a Labour revival. You know, he's not riding a wave of popular opinion. He's no Tony Blair whatsoever. He's just been fortuitous by circumstances. And by all accounts, look, I think it's looking very difficult for the Tories, but I don't think it's a done deal for Labour. They've got to get a bigger swing than Blair got in 97. You know, and if a week is a long time in politics, then what do we have? Like 6-7 months is an eternity.
Do you really think it can change, Giles? Because the polls right now are dire, and I've got to say I see no sign now of any sort of resurrection, any sort of hope for the Tories. But you seem to think there is still a glimmer of hope.
I think it's very difficult, but if they can unify and rally behind Sunak, if the economy continues to turn around, I think certainly they can make some headway back in the polls.
But hasn't the brand been damaged so much by, as you say, the events of the last 5 years or so, that whatever happens between now and the general election, the damage is done, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think the jury's still out on that. I think if you're going to pinpoint a moment, obviously the 45 days of Liz Truss could, and I say could, be the equivalent of the sort of 1992 Black Wednesday moment under John Major's government when everything turned. But I don't think we're kind of at that definitive point yet. But yeah, it's looking very, very difficult, very, very tricky. And, you know, it's kind of one of those things when you're on the back foot, events just take over, events drive everything, and they're constantly having to react to things as opposed to driving the agenda. And I don't think, you know, I would say for both parties, there's still not complete clarity on what's a story. I mean, you tell me what's the big sell for Labour. They're like, what they're saying is we're none of the above. Right?
Well, you're right. The big sell for Labour right now, it seems to me, is we're not the Conservatives. And that seems to be enough, right?
But I mean, you know, they should, you know, in my mind, that's not good enough. You know, you need to be articulating a vision for the future for the country. And we're still waiting to see that. You know, it might well be enough for them, but I don't think at this present time I don't think they have sealed the deal.
What do you think the Tories need to do between now and the election to claw back any chance at all, Giles, of any sort of vague success?
Yeah, look, I think like traditionally, you know, Labour's Achilles heel has been the economy. Traditionally, it's been the Tories' strongest card. I think it's hoping the economy continues to turn. And it will be, look, let's be quite blunt and frank about this. It will be a message of don't risk it. You know, this is no time for a novice.
But don't risk what? We've got the biggest fall in living standards in 70 years. You've got growth that's sluggish. You've got inflation that admittedly is coming down. But people don't feel there's a lot to risk because the economy is in such a poor position already, do they?
Well, I mean, that's your assumption. I don't think we know yet. I think
We know that
issues.
people feel a lot worse off than they were 10 years
Don't
ago.
risk it. Don't risk it with an untried, untested politician such as Starmer. Now, I think the real question for Labour is, let's see, how good is Starmer under pressure? How good will he be during a long political campaign? When are we going to see Labour take more policy positions? I think then we'll get a clearer sense of whether he has got the mettle and the intellectual muscle to be a good leader. So yeah, I think the Tories, as long as they are divided, then that is going to be hugely detrimental. So the question is, can they unify and get behind one leader? And this talk of Morden and for all these things is, it's incredibly destabilizing. Notwithstanding, I think there was a report out today saying that she'd probably lose her seat based on current polls. So, you'd have the element of, you can't have someone leading the party who's in a marginal seat. But yeah, look, I think also you just can't, because you can't have a third prime minister in a row who's not been elected. There'd be a huge deficit there. And that is what, Sunak's people are saying, but they're right. You'd have to then go to the polls to the country.
Mm. Giles, what would you say? What do you make of these MPs who are off the record spouting off to newspapers that Rishi Sunak are the problem? The people who supported Liz Truss, they are the people that have been, as you say, undermining the Prime Minister for much of the last year. Don't Tory backbenchers need to take a lot of the blame for their situation rather than just trying to pin it on their party leader?
Well, look, I think MPs are nervous. They're looking at the polls and they're seeing that potentially they're going to lose their seats, lose their livelihoods. I mean, in relation to Truss and Sunak, to be fair, the parliamentary party backed Sunak. It didn't back Truss.
But a lot of MPs did.
Well, not a lot. A fair few did, but overwhelmingly they wanted Sunak. It was the membership who went for Truss. So I have, a bit of sympathy with the parliamentary party. It did overwhelmingly give, in one sense, Sunak a mandate to go, but then the membership didn't. But, everything Sunak said that would go wrong did, to be fair to him, when it came to...
It's the MPs that back Liz Truss that are mainly, from what I can see, now the ones gunning for Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably an element of that there. But, all they've got to do is look at history, and it's a cliche, but divided parties don't win elections. So, there's got to be nothing, should very much focus the mind on where they need to get to. And as I said, I think, I don't think Labour have so far proven themselves to be unassailable. And I think there is still, there's still lots of areas where they're untested. I think the Tories need to be putting them under pressure and forcing them to try and take positions. Because, it's very clear at the moment. We know what Labour are against, but it's not totally clear what they're for.
Giles, just lastly, there's a lot of speculation about autumn election, October, November, possibly even next January. How likely is it that Rishi Sunak, given all the sort of foment and all the frustration being voiced by Tory MPs, that Rishi Sunak is going to be able to cling on that long? Do you think he will?
Yeah, I think he'll go probably as late as he sort of thinks is feasible, hoping the economy continues to turn. And obviously you've got the added element of the US elections as well. So they'll want to have at least a 2-week window in between that election, which I think is November the 5th to 6th. So I suspect you are looking November time. There's also a school of thought that the Tories could launch the election campaign at conference if their conference is before Labour, and then deny Labour the platform of having a party conference where not only can they raise money, but also have that platform in terms of TV and media coverage as well.
Do you think his MPs will give him that long? Do you think they'll allow him to be Prime Minister for another 6, 7, 8 months?
Yeah, I think they will. Look, he's going to face he's still got, obstacles in the road ahead, and he's potentially facing a tricky time after local elections in May, when I suspect the Tories won't do very well. So, yeah, but I think they have to. I don't think they have any other choice. And, they have to hope things turn around, because if they do get rid of him and go to the polls now, it could be more of a wipeout than, potentially what might happen in sort of 6, 7 months, when there's still scope and opportunity to potentially turn things around.
Giles, thanks for coming on. Grateful for your time tonight. Giles Kenningham, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party and Head of Press for David Cameron.